Dear friends, welcome back to this latest episode of the podcast series, The Way Out is In. I'm Jo Confino, working at the intersection of personal transformation and systems evolution.
And I am Brother Phap Huu, student of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh in the Plum Village tradition.
And today, dear listeners, we are going to be looking at one of the foundational teachings of Buddhism, which is the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
The way out is in.
Hello, dear friends. I am Jo Confino.
And I'm Brother Phap Huu.
And brother, we are going to talk today about the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So why are they called the three jewels? Because I imagine that's because they're very precious.
The three jewels, when I reflect on this, in a way, it's the legacy of the Buddha that he left behind for all of us. And the three jewels are the representation of the path of the Buddha, which is himself, first of all. When I speak about himself, it's not from an egotistic place, but it is for wisdom to be handed down, you have to have teachers. So it's important to recognize the teachers that are present in life, and particularly here in Buddhism, that the teacher, our original teacher, when we speak in this language in Buddhism, it refers to the Buddha himself. And the Buddha was a human being that gone through the experience and journey of life like all of us. Even he experienced loss at a very early age when his mother passed away when she gave birth to him. So that already was a condition of suffering that he had to learn to grieve, and he had to go through his journey without a mother. But very fortunately, his aunt became his mother. And his journey touching enlightenment allowed people to understand that this is a person that I can take refuge in, because now, through his practice and his cultivation, he has wisdom that he can transmit to us. And the word Buddha is a title. So Buddha was something that people gave to him, and it means awakening, to awaken. And it's really important to understand that the Buddha didn't want to be seen as a god himself. He wanted to be known as a teacher, as a human being that has found a way out of suffering. And his teaching is to liberate us from suffering. So that is a jewel. So when we are following this path, we know that these teachings didn't come from nowhere. It has a source. And that source is a human being that went through a journey and went through meditation, went to deep looking, deep cultivation, and to have breakthrough through suffering and understanding life, death, and being free from that and all the desires. So it's important for us as a Buddhist, especially I'm very fortunate to find the Plum Village path, because when I was growing up as a Buddhist, I also thought that the Buddha was a god, that the Buddha is somebody who sits on a cloud, who's levitating, is free. And we have folklores or legends, and we have movies that would incorporate Buddhism into its culture. And for example, maybe a lot of listeners will know of the famous tales of the Journey to the West. And it's about a monk that from China, he traveled all the way to India, to Nalanda, to study, to learn, and then he brought back the sutras to China. And he did a very big role in transmitting these wisdom to the Far East. And that is how we have a lot of sutras for us to read. And he translated from ancient language into Chinese. And so that was actually a true story, true facts. But there was a wonderful author that wrote a story based on his journey with legends of the Monkey King. And the Monkey King was born from a rock and became more superior than humans and went through a journey. And the only superior God, in a way, or being was the Buddha that can subdue him. And so, I grew up with these folk stories and these amazing movies about it because I love martial arts. So it was nothing but amazing action. So you can consider like Journey to the West like the Star Wars of the Western film industry and concepts and ideals of good versus bad. And so Journey to the West was a part of our childhood. And when I see the Buddha as somebody who can subdue the Monkey King, I was just like, okay, this guy's pretty cool. So there's a lot of myth around, the Buddha or the stereotypical idea that he is more superior than all of us and so on. But coming to Plum Village and hearing our teachers speak about Buddha nature, which is translated as the awakened seed in each and every one of us. And Thai, meaning teacher in Vietnamese, Thai has said that all of us, we have Buddha nature. Every being has Buddha nature. Even a dog has Buddha nature. A tree has Buddha nature. Every being that is present has the awareness of mindfulness in its way. So the first jewel is the Buddha, meaning that these teachings come from direct experience. And these words are very important, direct experience. And that's why for me, growing up and meeting this particular Dharma and these particular teachings from the Plum Village tradition, it really spoke my language. It wasn't about blind faith. It wasn't about like, these are words from a book that we can't touch and we can't change, we can't challenge. But they are written from, recorded from the stories of the Buddha, from teachings himself. And we have to know that it probably have been also some of the teachings have been missing because through oral transmission, things get lost, right? But fortunately, in this tradition, then the different teachers also practice that Dharma, so would also use and examine their own practice to sometimes readjust, recorrect the teachings that have been handed down. And we are very lucky that Thai has done this to renew Buddhism. And Thai was very aware that in our times, we are thirsty of spirituality without knowing it, because it is hidden with a layer of religion. And a lot of us can be allergic to religion. Even sometimes I'm still allergic to religion. I'm still allergic to sometimes some of the ceremonial stuff that we do as a monk, but it's a full package, so I'm here. But I've learned to understand, have curiosity, and bring meaning to it, and to also see where can we adjust to make it relevant for our times. So when we talk about the first jewel is the Buddha, first of all is we have to understand that each and every one of us have Buddha nature. And because the Buddha was able to transform and walk the path of liberation, that also means that we all have that potential. And that's very key. And fortunately, some of us may be able to be with people who have some of those characteristics that we can learn from. And in the Zen tradition, and then in Buddhism, we always need a transmitter. There's a relationship between teacher and student where there is a companionship on the path. If a teacher understands that his true belonging and his true continuations are his students, then he would do everything in his capacity or her capacity or their capacity to transmit the wisdom that has been handed down from them. So the Buddha jewel is to acknowledge that this tradition has a root teacher and it comes from direct experience and it embodies the awakened nature that each and every one of us has. And a good teacher, a good Buddha, can allow us to touch our Buddha nature.
Wow, brother, that was so beautifully spoken. We could just stop now, actually. A couple of things that you said I just want to pick up on. One is, one of the things I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for Thai is he says Buddhism doesn't mean ignoring your own traditional religious roots. And that Buddha nature is, by the fact that it's not considered a religion, it can come alongside your religious history. So that if you're Jewish or Christian, you don't need to say, oh, I'm a Buddhist. You can continue with your own traditions. And Thai says it's so important to stay rooted in your traditions because that is our individual ancestry. And that Buddhahood doesn't contradict that, doesn't overlay it, but actually comes alongside it to support that.
Exactly. And I think I've said this a few times in the podcast, but what has been very enlightening for me was when Thai speaks about Buddhism, he says, even in Buddhism, we are made of non-Buddhist elements. So there are some teachings that have come before the Buddha's time, and the Buddha has incorporated them into the tradition, into the understanding. Like the last episode, we spoke about the 4 minds of love, and a lot of that already came from an ancient wisdom. And sometimes new teachers can shine new lights to them and make it very adaptable and very relevant for our times. So this is also a wonderful mind to have, because it can also allow us to be even free in our path. And I think one of the strength from the 3 jewels is a sense of belonging also. And I think I can speak of it very, very confidently, where we all have a longing for home, a longing for refuge. And when we speak about the 3 jewels in Buddhism, we speak about I take refuge in the 3 jewels. And that also means I take refuge in the awakened nature, that I have somewhere as my guiding light in a way. And whenever I feel lost, I know there's a refuge. Where's my Buddha nature? My Buddha nature is my mindfulness shining in, shining out, shining near, shining far. Thai has said that mindfulness itself is Buddha nature, right mindfulness, because right mindfulness allows us to know what to do and what not to do in the present moment. So the Buddha nature, not as just an individual, but it has now become a whole movement, a movement of awakening. So spirituality can give us a place of inner freedom as well as inner refuge. And for me as an individual, I think when we speak about freedom, it means freedom from our suffering, freedom from our craving, freedom from our being lost. And it's wonderful to say that there is a foundation that I can always rely on. And so in the deep understanding of our journey on the path of spirituality, all 3 of the jewels, but the first jewel that we're speaking on is not outside of us. It is right here, right now. And the teachings becomes our Buddha teachings, our Buddha light, our Buddha nature itself. So Tai always jokes, and it's very true. We can continue and make vows to aspire to be a Buddha, but most of us are part-time Buddhas. Meaning only when we are aware, we have that Buddha nature activated. But the deeper we can invest our time and energy in the cultivation of applied mindfulness into everyday life and the understanding and love and compassion in the ethical way, our Buddha nature becomes more and more present and alive. And Buddhahood is right here, right now.
And also, brother, what you talk about and what Tai talked about is that this is a lifelong journey. This is not like, it's not like you reach Buddhahood and then you're enlightened and then you do nothing. Because one of the things that Tai talked about in the past was that the Buddha suffered all through his life. It's not like he reached enlightenment and just sat there. He had to continue practice, and he had to deal with continuing suffering. It wasn't as though his life was perfect. There were all sorts of problems within the community, within the political framing of where he lived. So can you talk a little bit about just that sense of, actually, Tai would say, don't try and be perfect, but that every day we can improve a little bit. That even at the end of our life, it's endless. It's not like we reach a destination with it.
Yeah, I think the Buddha was also free from titles, and how dangerous a title can feel that we have come to the end of our path, right? And it's very true what you have spoken on. A Buddha would know that Buddha nature is ever growing. It is very organic. It is conditioned. And at the core of it, the Buddha is a human being. So he needs to eat, he needs to sleep, he needs to wake up, he gets sick. He has students, he has well-behaved students, he has students that are literally punks and creating trouble for the Sangha. And you can read all about it in the history of the Buddha. Where does the precepts come from? Our mindful trainings. We, as monks, we have 250 rules. And the rules were created because monastics were behaving in a way that wasn't appropriate to the path that they have vowed to walk. So you can even see that even in the Buddha's times, people, human beings living with an enlightened person will still fall into darkness and traps of suffering. And the Buddha would say, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Why would you say that? My students, from now on, you are not allowed to do this, and that becomes a rule. So even during the Buddha's time, the Buddha was so alive, he was so active, and he was so present for his community. And that's why there has been so much trust and faith in this teacher, because he is so connected to the present moment and the suffering. And when we learn about the Vinaya, we learn about the origins of where they come from. And the first rule of a monk or a nun is we cannot have sexual intercourse. The moment we do that, we're out. Game over. We are done. We've been cooked, And it comes from the time of the Buddhas when his students, when they just ordained, didn't have precepts yet. It was quite simple. You just come up to the Buddha or you come up to some of his elder students and you say, I want to be a monk. And they would you would kneel in front of them. They would kneel in front of you, and the teacher would put his hand on the student's head and say, repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. And I think later, I take refuge in the Sangha, and then you're a monk. But then later on, the monastics sometimes there's no rules, so they don't know what is right and wrong. So there's a story that, and it's true because we have this precept. So there was a young man who became a monk, and his mother was not very supportive of his journey and his decision. And she kept nagging him to come back to life, to lay life. And her main mission was she wants a grandchild. So she's like, okay, look, darling, I already figured it out. I got a beautiful young woman that is ready to receive your seeds. And this young monk was just so annoyed, and he just wanted to be a monk. He just wanted to be left alone. And he provided. And the good nature and faith of once you enter this path, you know when you've done something that is not fully correct of the journey you have committed to. And he reported to his brothers, his monk fellows, and he said, "Hey guys, I did this and I feel something's really wrong about it." And they all felt really wrong about it too. And they went and they told the Buddha. And the Buddha, I translate in my mind, the Buddha was probably so annoyed and so upset. It's like, "You idiots." It's like, duh, like monastics, we don't do this. We've committed our path to being free from desire. So this is a practice we don't get involved in. And from that moment, the first precept was created that monastics were not allowed to have sexual intercourse. So you can only imagine how many stories that the Buddha had to listen to. And I can only imagine like the Buddha saying, "Dear Buddha, can we have a moment with you?" And he, in his head, probably, "What did you do this time?" and then like monks tattletelling on each other. And all of this happened. So during the time of the Buddha, we can only imagine how he had to evolve as a teacher. And that also means he has to evolve as a human being, his capacity of love and understanding. Even in his own community, his cousin wanted to take over the community, wanted to become the Buddha, plotted against the Buddha, divided the Sangha, created his own party, partnered up with a prince to gain power. So there was even politics started to enter into the Sangha, the community. So the Buddha had to adapt all the time, had to be so present. So here we can also start to see that Buddhism is a very direct experience to reality. I think a lot of times people come to the practice or has this stereotype image of spirituality. It's like we're levitating, we're sitting beautifully on a mountaintop with foggy mist, and it's magical. And I think there are moments like that. There are beautiful moments like that. But there is, whatever we experience in the world all seeps into the monastery life or the Sangha's life, because we're also a fabric of this society. So when we learn more about Buddhism and the Buddha himself, you get to see the journey and be almost, I feel so grateful for his intuitions and his creative side of creating the Sangha. So there's a very amazing book, and I know, Jo, you haven't read it yet. Finished it.
Thanks for that. Can we edit this bit out, please?
But it's one of my favorite books, and it took me the second time to really finish it. But I consider it one of Thai's masterpiece, and he has many. But it's called Old Path, White Cloud, and it is Thai's work of retelling the story of the Buddha with historical facts. But the way Thai would say it, the mission of that book was to humanize the Buddha again, so that we can see the Buddha as a human being. And we go through the story of the Buddha's life through the eyes and experience of a young monk who was an untouchable in the caste system of India, was a buffalo boy, so those who guides and tends to the buffalo. And we go through the story of this young monk named Savasti. So if we are curious, please seek it out. It is a thick book, but it's very deep. I would say all of Plum Village's core teachings are in that book.
Okay, I'll read it. And brother, related to that, the way you describe the Buddha is pretty close to the way I would describe Thai and his path. So can you just talk a bit about sort of, Thai's life, in a sense, reflects in some way the life of the Buddha, because he went through intense suffering in the war in Vietnam, in being exiled, in being attacked for trying to renew Buddhism. And his path, we can see that over his whole lifetime, he developed his practice, he developed the teachings and brought them into a modern context. He sort of developed community, and I know we're going to get to the teachings and community later, but he, it doesn't feel so wrong and so different rather. And so you were his attendant for 17 years, and you watched him for much longer than that. How do you see Thai's life in relationship to the Buddha's life?
I think we all need role models in our life. And the Buddha was definitely an impactful historical person, but I think very personal to Thai. And he have shared it himself in a lot of teachings, especially to children. When he was a young boy, growing up during the French occupation of Vietnam, seeing the poverty, the destruction, the chaos, and the uncertainty of a nation. And there was so much fear, so much anxiety. And one day he came across a magazine with an image of a Buddha. And he would explain it like the artist was very good at drawing this human being with a face that was so kind, that has such relaxation and had this smile of peace. And that became an image that Thai was very attracted to, that he said he wanted to be able to be as peaceful and as calm as this image, and to have a smile as the smile of the Buddha. So we can already see the impact there. And the making of who Thai was is very conditioned by his surrounding, his family, and so on. And we're going to go deeper into that in some later on episodes that we're going to dive into really the life of Thai. But one thing that I can share is, I think a lot of the times when I was with Thai and having seen him also embrace the difficulties of a Sangha, he had a place of refuge, which was the Buddha. And sometimes we went through some challenges in the community. And one time I remember Thai saying, I think the Buddha's time was tough too. So everything that we're going through is totally okay. And it's true. I've seen monks and nuns come into this hut that we're sitting in and would bow to Thai and would say, Thai, I am leaving monastic life. And it's painful. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of emotions and feelings that come with that. The question, did I fail as a teacher? What could I have done differently? Could I given him or her more love? And the grief of losing a student. And there was one time, there were some years we just had so many exits in our community that it shakes the core of the Sangha. And Thai as a human being is also very sensitive. So all of his emotions are channeled. And I remember one time they say, I'm sure when the Buddha witnessed his students leaving, he also had to take refuge in his breathing. Right? And that's a skillful way of saying like, Thai will practice breathing now. And it's wonderful to have references or role models of people that we know were great human beings, but they are also at the fate of impermanence in life, of the uncertainty of life. And in Buddhism, we don't speak about a God, a being that has all the answers, that when we talk about even the Pure Land of the Buddha, it doesn't mean there's no suffering there. It means that in that place, people know how to be with their suffering. So I think that Buddha, as a noble teacher that was here 2,500 years before us, is still very close in those moments of suffering. Because, the Buddha must also went through this. And that can give you a relief that, so I am doing my best. And there are some things that are out of my control.
Thank you, brother. And just one other thing related to what you said earlier, which was around, one of the things I think people are very attracted to Plum Village is that they're not told to believe anything that they don't experience. And so one of the things that's talked about a lot is coming back to the island of oneself, so that actually we can find refuge not in the Buddha outside of ourselves, but the Buddha inside of ourselves. And as you said earlier, that needs to come from direct experience. So can you talk a little bit more about what it means to be in the island of oneself, what it really means to have faith in oneself? Because Thai talked about, the Buddha is in us, but we're also in the Buddha. It's not a one-way relationship. And I think often people feel when they're looking up to someone that it's a one-way street, that the person is a teacher and they just receive. But I think one of the things that I've discovered in the Plum Village teaching, which I think is very powerful, is the fact that actually the teachings don't go one way. That the more I learn, the more I contribute back to those very teachings.
So this is a great segue to the second jewel, which is the Dharma. And the Dharma is a jewel because it is the teachings that we can learn and study and put into practice. And the island that you speak about, it's very fundamental to understand in the Plum Village tradition. That island is our breathing. That island is an anchor for us so that we don't fall into deeper thinking or anger or despair, that we can allow ourselves to go down that rabbit hole. And each and every one of us have many islands, and many islands support each other's islands. And so in the practice island, the breathing is an island. The walking meditation is an island. The sitting is an island. They are places of refuge. And talking on the body, the human body, we have the 5 skandhas, our eyes, ears, nose, tongues, minds. Those are skandhas. Those are like the windows of our connection to life, what we see, what we hear. And what we see, what we hear, what we think, what we perceive, they all have an impact to our inner island, our minds, our views. So sometimes it's important to check in our island. How is it? Is it a mess? Do we need to close some windows so we don't keep disturbing our own minds? And that's why in the monasteries or in a practice center, there are very concrete sessions of practice. When it's sitting, you close yourself off from screens, conversations, projects. It's a moment you're going to close your windows so you can come into your island and take care of your island within. So this island is already there, but sometimes we need a teacher to help us see the island, to give us some tools so that we have equipment to garden the island within us. We can take care of the trees, the weeds, the path, the fences, the boundaries that we need to create, and so on and so on. Or maybe some boundaries we can open now because we're freer now. So the island within us is also a place of refuge because that's where the teacher becomes our own path. So at the beginning, the teacher teaches us, but a good teacher would tell us that those wisdom are already in us. So now we speak about the Dharma. And in a historical fact, the Dharma is usually spoken about the recorded Dharma, so the sutras that we receive, the texts that are still preserved and we still recite from the time of the Buddha, and also spoken Dharma, which is maybe this podcast there's a lot of spoken Dharma. There's a lot of spoken Dharma now online, on YouTube, on streaming sites, and so on. And these are Dharma, that words that come from the teachings of Buddhism. But Thai emphasizes on another Dharma that I feel can be much more attractive and relevant in a way, because not all of us will become Dharma teachers. Not all of us have that aspiration to be channeling these teachings. And Thai speaks about the living Dharma, and that is the way we apply our practice into everyday life. So when we talk about the living Dharma, it comes so concrete to the way we walk. That is a way of giving, of teaching. The way we cook, the way we paint, the way we write. An article that we write can be a Dharma in itself. It doesn't have to have the language of the Dharma, but it is embraced with understanding, with kindness. That is Dharma. That's a living Dharma. And the living Dharma is also a transmission that we give out every day. Our thoughts can be a living Dharma. Our speech can be a living Dharma. And our actions can be a living Dharma. So we don't have to wait for us to practice for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, or to even be called an enlightened being, then to think that we can transmit the Dharma. The Dharma is ever present. That is written in the sutra, that has been told again and again by many teachers, even our teacher. The Dharma is always present. Why? Because suffering is always present. Whenever there is suffering, the Dharma can be found. And sometimes just by seeing a lotus flower, that can be a teaching in itself. Or listening to the sounds of birds, or seeing a sunset, that might be a moment of awakening of how precious life is. That is living Dharma. So the Dharma, in the language of our tradition, it really transcends the written Dharma, the spoken Dharma, but it is the Dharma that can be seen and practiced from all beings and all miracles of life. Even in death, there is Dharma there. Even in destruction, there is Dharma. And this shines the light to even in suffering, there is Dharma, because we can learn from the suffering. And then this Dharma that we learn from becomes our own teacher. That becomes a living experience for us. And then we can transform and we can transmit that. So that is a continuous journey. And when you were talking about the Buddha and the students and the teachings, the receiver and the practitioner, you speak on a deep insight, and that is emptiness. So to meet the Dharma, one of the first characteristics is you have to have the minds of a beginners. Yeah, you have to be curious. You have to be ready to try it, right? We speak about not having blind faith, but also when we are too cynical, critical, then you're not giving yourself an opportunity to touch wisdom. So there is also this characteristic that we all already have, is to be open. If there is a human being that has gone through so much suffering and is so peaceful right now, he has something to tell us. And we have to put our egos aside, our own stories aside, to listen. Thai always says in a Dharma talk, the best is not to come with a pen and papers and not to agree to what Thai says. Because the moment you agree to what the teacher is speaking to, then you are not listening with a mind that is open. Because the moment you don't agree, then you reject. Then that doesn't have a role. You're not doing yourself a favor. And Tai speaks about listening and experiencing the Dharma is like we are the field that is open to receive the rain, the sun, the nutriments of the whole cosmos, so the potentials in us has a chance to rise up. And in our language, the seeds that are in our store consciousness, our ancestral wisdom have been handed down to us, have an opportunity to manifest. And we can only do that also when we can open our hearts and mind to receive. So to receive the Dharma, you have to be open to the Buddha, the teachings, in order to receive. So that's why in our tradition, when we want to become a monk, you have to write a request. It's because you're opening your heart to receive. And every time we want to receive, to become a monk, to become a novice, to become a bhikshu, to receive the 14 mindfulness training, we have to have an aspiration, because that is the heart space of wanting to learn. But if your heart is closed, then how can you receive it? So the transmitter also relies on the receiver. And when the receiver is there, then the transmitter has a role to offer. So there is deep interbeing there.
Thank you, brother. A couple of things that come up from what you say. One is, which I have found so supportive of my own practice, is not to see Buddhism as a sitting meditation on its own. You know, there are a lot of people in the world who think that practice is sitting for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes in the morning and then continuing your day. But that actually in every moment of every waking minute and hour that we can touch these teachings and actually connect to them deeply. And that involves, as you say, an opening up rather than a segmentation, which we often sort of see people doing. And the other thing is that it brings up for me about the importance of focus and concentration and taking time. You know, we live in a world where a lot of people talk about sort of the supermarket spirituality, that people will go and, like in a supermarket, go and test out one spiritual tradition for a short period of time, go and then check out another. And what I have learned is about the importance of sticking with one tradition, because actually it takes time. And I know there's an understanding in Buddhism about ripening, and we've done a podcast episode on that, but that it takes time for this to sink in. It takes time for this to unfurl. There are layer after layer after layer. And if we come in with an expectation of sort of it's going to come to us straight away, and if after a week we haven't got it, then actually it's not for us, then it doesn't work. So this is something I've really learned deeply, and why I have chosen to put, as my wife Paz says, all my eggs in one basket, which is this tradition, because actually what it's shown is that it allows me to understand life better, allows me to feel more stability, allows me to feel more joy and happiness in my life. So okay, that's good enough. Why would I need to look elsewhere? And that it can go deeper and deeper and deeper. So you have been a monk now for over 20 years. What has been your experience with the Dharma about, you know, from age 13 to now you're
37 or 38.
Whatever, in your late 30s.
Yes. I'm born in 87, so whoever wants to do the math can do the math.
Where are you, how do you see that path for yourself of connecting to the Dharma, and how do you see it ripening from here on? So where do you place yourself in it?
I come back to a moment that I met my hermitage. When I say this, it's a story from Thai that he said when he was a child, he met the hermit and the well. It's a very famous story in the Plum Village tradition. And I met my hermit when my dad was telling me a story of his own journey as a young man. And he has already come to Plum Village, and he came here in the early 90s. He was looking for his place of refuge and healing from his journey as a boat person. And before we sleep, me and my sister would love to hear our dad's story because they're epic, like literally epic stories that can only be seen in movies. And because it was during the wartime and so on. So he has some amazing stories. And what he would usually do right before we sleep, then he would put his hand on my stomach. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I always felt like when he put his hand on my stomach, I felt like he's counting my breathing. And I was very attentive to the breath. And I think that was my first encounter of mindful breathing without knowing. And later on, I put all the dots together. Oh, in Plum Village, there's a practice of deep belly breathing, where when you're very emotional, you would put your hand on your stomach just to feel the breath, so you're not feeling lost in your stories and in your thoughts. And of course, by origin, my family is Buddhist, but there's so much things in life where I think it's just luck. So I would say my luck was having my father that was curious enough to wanting to have a spiritual life. And by chance, in the early, I think 1990s, Thai and Sister Jang Kong were in Toronto. And he came to a talk and he's like, dude, I need to go to Plum Village. And he worked for 2 years saving enough to come. And fortunately, my dad had also this characteristics, like as a father, I have to introduce spirituality to my children. So he waited until we had enough money, and then we were mature enough to make this travel. And then Plum Village, boom, coming to this unknown place, unknown territory, even unknown community was such a wow factor for me, because it was really meeting a community that embodied the Dharma and embodied the awakened aspiration. And I really wasn't feeling like I'm here for devotional practice. And I speak about luck because never in a million years that I would think I would be a monk. And we went to school, like whoever tells you to become a monk as a career, right? It's like, so it's really luck by chance that I was able to meet this Dharma. And when you met the Dharma and you see that it fits your cup of tea, it's literally the nutriment that you need, why keep looking? And I think maybe we're lucky, Jo, to have found a community and a practice that fits us. And I say this, and I know I'm very biased to Plum Village because this place have given birth to my spiritual dimension. So there is a bias towards Plum Village tradition. But I also am very aware that Thai's teaching and Thai's Dharma cultivation, as well as the way of maybe some of the monastic life that we live here, is not suitable for everyone. And our Dharma is not suitable for everyone. And I'm totally okay with that. I'm not here to convert anyone. I'm not here to tell you this is the best. I'm just offering, hey, this is one of the doors of spirituality that you can experience. And I have also seen people who have done spiritual shopping. And I feel I have a lot of compassion for them because never is enough. And what we're searching for sometimes I feel is so beyond us that no matter what community or what teachings you will touch, it will never answer because you already have a view and you're not open to learning. So there's a saying in the monastic culture and in the spiritual world is when the boat arrives at your shore, you have to enter and get on it. You have a choice. And that boat won't wait for you though, because time passes and you can let it slip away. And your heart plays a big part in this. So when I was 13, my heart was really fascinating. It was like, it wants to be a monk. Absolutely wants to be a monk. And I don't know how to explain that besides like, I think I fell in love with this. And I do know that if 2001 and my mother didn't give me permission, I don't think I would be here doing this podcast. So there's so much conditions that come all around to make us meet the Dharma and then to listen to our hearts and then to let go of the views and the stories because I wanted to be a successful person, whatever that meant. But I was so ready to abandon that because I've felt and I've touched something very new here. And the path of the Dharma, there's a lot of letting go also because you're going to meet new teachings in ways of how to cultivate our minds now. So we have to make new decisions. We're not going to go back to watching these particular TV series or movies because it doesn't nourish our Dharma body now. So because we're an embodiment of the Dharma now, so whatever we're interacting with, it counter or it nourishes what we're trying to cultivate. So the Dharma is very conditioned, and do not take the Dharma for granted. And I have met my own community where those who have taken for granted the Dharma and don't take it seriously, and they will lose the Dharma. So that's why the three jewels also spoken in our tradition as a jewel to have gratitude towards, in order to honor that embodiment and that putting into action of. So I think all of us will have a very unique story, a unique journey to the Dharma. And for some, it is through pure luck. For some, it is through suffering that makes us have to discover this path or look for another way because everything we've been doing in life is just not adding up anymore. And I've met so many people that come through Plum Village, and each story is so unique. Each story is a teaching in its own. And each story also gives an evidence of we need a spiritual dimension. And then I think this is a good segue in our tradition to come to the Sangha because the Dharma in the light of the three jewels is also practiced by people. So people create a Sangha. And in the traditional form, it takes 4 members to be a Sangha. So wherever back in the days, when monks would want to create a new Sangha, they would need 4 monks to form a council that can be considered a Sangha. And Thai really took that on as a mission. Because Thai, in knowing, and probably he had his intuition and sense, especially being in the West, of the mindset of individualism is so powerful. It's so strong. It divides us. It pushes us away. It's a competition. Even in spirituality, it's a huge competition. Right now, I've discovered and I've learned that mindfulness is a multi-billion-dollar pathway. Well-being is a $1 trillion business. A lot of hotels are being transformed into a well-being center to pamper, to care, And, it has its place, but it can be misinterpreted. Also, Plum Village becomes that. And there's a danger there. We're a monastery, so we can't give everyone 4-star treatment, and there is an importance of understanding the difference between a monastery and a well-being center, for example. And a monastery, we do have to have monastic people who have fully committed their life to this. And when Thai had this realization that, because Thai didn't have students until much later in his life, and there's a lot of factors to it too because of the war. And I think there was uncertainty of his own life because there was 2 assassination attempts on his life, as well as he witnessed his lay students being killed during the war, as well as he had one early student in Vietnam, monastic student, and he also died. So I think there was a lot of grief. And it was only in 1988, so 6 years after the establishment of Plum Village, which is 1982, Plum Village was founded. And 6 years later, Thai realized, if I want to have and build a center of transformation of peace, I need community, and community that will stay with me. Because he had a lot of lay students, but lay students would go home and have children, have family, and that becomes their little Sangha, and they have to honor that path. But Thai needed a living community with him. And he also thought that he would take care of all the already existing monks and nuns in the world. And there were a lot of them, and they would come to Plum Village to seek guidance from Thai. But then they would all have to return back to Vietnam, America, Germany, different places in the world. And when they're not conditioned by this environment, they have to fall back to what they started. And a lot of it is a traditional Buddhism. And Thai's vision for Buddhism was very different, was a renewal, was a change, and a language where monks and nuns are very much a part of the society. And so in 82, Thai received his first 3 students. And I would say Thai's a feminist because all 3 of them were women. And they were powerhouses of Plum Village, Sister Giang Khong, Sister Giang Đức, and Sister Giang Vi. And they were his students, and they started to become this new foundation. And with Thai having students, showed other people, oh, Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh is having students, I'm going to sign up, right? So there was a domino effect there. And so that vision of Thai, I would consider it his greatest masterpiece, which is creating the Sangha. And Thai speaks about the Sangha in a very highly jeweled, and in the traditional Buddhism, people talk a lot about the Buddha. It's easy to talk about the Buddha, an enlightened being better than all of us. We're little, we have to listen to him. It's easy. And then the Dharma is the words of truth. It is the path of enlightenment. That's easy. And Thai was like, but the Sangha is what keeps those 2 jewels alive and relevant. And that was and is a huge contribution to Buddhism that Thai is and has laid down for other Buddhist community and traditions to see. Because if the Sangha is not alive, is not receiving young people, it's a dying tradition. And he really cared about this. He really cared about young people coming into the community. If any tradition and young people are not coming in, we're doing something wrong. It's not speaking to the language. There's not new blood cell in this body. And Thai put a lot of emphasis in his own learning to adapt to the young generation. What is their suffering? How do I communicate so they can understand the Dharma, so that it doesn't feel like it's far away? It's very practical. And that is an art in itself.
Thank you, brother. And related to that, in your experience, in terms of how people are able to approach the Dharma and integrate it into their lives, what's your experience of the young people who come to Plum Village? Because, Thai was very intentional in setting up the Wake Up movement, which was specifically to support young people in the Dharma. And I'm just wondering, what's your experience of how people arrive to the Dharma when they come here, often for the first time? What is it that touches them that you notice?
I think the energy is probably the first thing that they probably experience here. It's an energy of embracing, I would say. Some people have shared to us, like when they are welcomed into Plum Village, and one of the monks or one of the long-term friends that are here would greet them and would give them a tour of the place. And sometimes, like, one of our legendary guest master, Brother Thich Nhat Hanh, would say, "You are home." And, those very simple words, "you are home," to some people is impactful to them. So the language that we have curated as a culture here is something that can be felt, and maybe something weird for people because it's too nice, it's too kind, like everybody's smiling. What is up with this place? And no, we're not on drugs, we're not on edibles or anything like that. We're just high on happiness and high on life. I think meeting other young people is very empowering. Because I have been to temples where, like, dude, I'm like the youngest person here. What the heck am I doing here, And so coming to a place where you see others somewhat similar to you is very empowering. Then you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Oh my God, I'm not a weirdo, and whatever, thoughts that come up in our own minds, right? So the journey of young people coming to Plum Village has always been, I think, a core mission of Thai in speaking to children, in speaking to teenagers, in speaking to the young people of today. Why? Because they're also the future. So we are already ancestors for a whole generation, and then they will be ancestors for another generation. And Thai put a lot of effort in his lifetime in making sure that the community is fun. That was very important, that the community knows how to enjoy life. Music was allowed, monastic playing guitar, playing piano, cello, violin, contributing to the artistic side of the community. Sport was very important because Thai said, if all of my students are so young, they have a lot of energy and they need a place to put their energy, right? Whether it is agitation, whether it is just aspiration, it is just youth, or it's sexual energy, there needs to be a landing place for all this energy. So as a teacher, he had to be very creative. And as Plum Village started to really take shape and form and evolve, and there was a generation of a lot of elders that came to the Dharma, met the Dharma, and became also core member of the Dharma. And sometimes it means that it's a little bit privileged because you have to have enough money to come here. You have to have enough time to come here. So we had those who were retired. But Thai was like, okay, this is great. We have a foundation. Young monastics are coming in. And now we have to find a pathway for young people to have their own Sangha. And Wake Up was a continuation of different organizations that already happened in Vietnam. For example, we have something called Gia đình Phật tử, which would translate as families of the Buddhist tradition. So it's kind of like a boy and girl scout, and all of the teachings are on Buddhism, and they do a lot of camps. And I was very allergic to it. Actually, growing up, one of my cousins was actually a leader of one of the Gia đình Phật tử, the youth group. For me, it just looked too military. It just felt too like rigid for whatever reason, and I never gave it a chance. So I don't really know. But But coming to Plum Village, funny enough, we're not uniform beside the monastic. And I think somehow that felt really comfortable for me, that I can wear my Toronto Raptors t-shirt or Maple Leafs because I'm a huge fan of these sports. We can still be who we are here. Of course, there are some clothing rules, so, because we are in a monastery to dress appropriately, but it's not a particular way of looking that then you would feel like there's no freedom in a way. So Wake Up was this initiative where you are young from 18 to 35, and it is open to Buddhists and non-Buddhists for an awakened society. And at that time, there was a lot of young monks and nuns. So I remember Thai really gave Brother Spirit and Sister True Dedication like the key to the Wake Up movement. It's like, this is my mission and you're going to implement it. And they were literally just ordained. And suddenly, it was a very skillful act of Thai. Now that I reflect on it, and I've spoken to our siblings about this was Thai entrusting the future to us. Thai knows he's not going to be here forever. All of us, his students, are going to take this ship and move it forward. And so Thai gave us a vision, but he wants us to implement it, to use our creativity, to use our skillfulness, to use everything that we receive from him and apply it. All the Dharma, now apply it and make it adaptable for the young people. And we have had our journey with it. I remember like the first retreat was, whether it was Sangha or Middle Hamlet, it was literally 20 people. And every year it increased 30, 40. And now, Jo, every retreat, 800 young people would come. Filled out. We have no more space. And I think it also speaks to our times where there is much more understanding of spirituality. It has entered mainstream. Mindfulness has also entered mainstream. And the suffering of our time tells us that more money actually isn't the solution. More power actually isn't the solution. Even more advanced technology, science. But what about the human hearts? If we don't know how to be with our suffering, it seems like we just keep creating more suffering. So there's also this this deep desire to live a more sustainable life. This is sustainable, meaning keeping our hearts intact, our aspiration true, so that we don't get corrupted by power and money and fame, and also corrupted by suffering, because we may become that suffering for others. So I also feel like there's this shift in collective consciousness right now, because in the earlier days, like, most of the children were brought by their parents, and then the teenagers were dragged by their parents. And then the young people were encouraged by others. But now there's a lot of own motivation, own curiosity. And we even hear stories from parents, their children telling their parents, like, did you book the retreat yet? Because I really want to go. I mean, that's amazing to hear. And it's music to my ears when I hear that, because then that openness to receive is so powerful.
Thank you, brother. And Thai said that in the 21st century, the future was not in one Buddha, but in community. And, when we look at the world currently, we see this move away from globalization and back to localism. And we see that there are many, many people, particularly young people, who are looking to create community, and also finding it very, very difficult. So my eldest brother, for example, who's living in Portugal, was keen to set up a community. And he said that all these people who came and they were discussing how to set up community, that everyone wanted community, but everyone wanted community their way. And so that sort of individualism was creeping in, because people wanted something, but they could only see it from their vantage point. And the one thing about Plum Village is that the community has a skeleton, which is the practice. And I consider it a bit like a centrifugal force around which everything revolves. And because everyone trusts the Dharma and benefits from the Dharma, that the Dharma becomes the heart of the community. The community is built around that. So I'm just wondering what, as you look out in the world and see this wish to create community, how do we create communities that are healthy?
I think that's a whole podcast.
Okay, well, we'll do that. We'll do that in the next one.
Yeah.
Let's have a little introduction.
But it's one of the most noble aspiration, our teacher would say. When people leave Plum Village, he would always encourage them, please help build communities. We need more communities. And I think when we speak about community, we don't have to think about 50 people, 100 people. And a lot of folks that come through Plum Village, they see let's say, the success story of Plum Village. Like, we're a thriving community there. A lot of people come through. So they want to implement exactly this to there. That is a wrong way to start. That's too much high hope. Because you don't know about the struggle that we've been through, the resilience, and as well as, Tai started many communities, and he saw he has so much experience from building community, from fragrant palm leaves back in Vietnam. That was a community, that was a hermitage, a refuge from the war. So that was a beginning of a community. Of course, living in a temple is already a community, but then he set up SYSS, which is School for Youth and Social Service, and then Vang Han University. So that's a whole institute. And then to America on his mission of calling for peace, creating little hubs here and there, and then a Sweet Potato Village near Paris. So there was many experiences that Tai had to go through, so that when Plum Village started to take shape and form and establish in 82, it wasn't as alive as it is today. It has its own journey. But one of the, I think, noblest mindset is the faith and trust that knowing a community can do good for the world, and to develop that resilience to always show up. So Tai was very resilient in always giving Dharma talks on Thursday and Sunday. That was his commitment. Even if he would go on a tour for 3 months and he arrives to France on Wednesday, and tomorrow is a Thursday, which is a day of mindfulness, he would show up and give a talk. No questions asked. Not checking in, am I tired or not? Is jet lag or not? No, this is my commitment to the Sangha. So those of us who want to develop a community, you have to have a very strong bodhicitta, a really strong commitment to showing up and to being available unconditionally. And that, where does that come from? That comes from the trust and belief that a community is a refuge for healing and for connection and for building real peace in our living moment, our present moment. So there has to be a pathway that we have to have faith in. Then there is the element of harmony. What are the rules that we all have to apply? Each and every one of us, no questions asked, right? So it's, we are a monastic culture. We've survived this long because there are laws and regulations in our culture that has guided us to survive to now. So that is also freedom. When people hear this, you may think, oh, that's not freedom. No, these are rules so we don't break as a Sangha, so that we can continue to build and to be together in a way that supports one another. So if you come to Plum Village and we don't follow our tradition, we don't follow our practice, and we don't follow our rules, then suddenly everybody can do anything here. It would be a chaos. It will be one time Thai said this, and it'd be a circus. But because we have guidelines, we have guidance, we have an objective of what we are developing and building here, then it's very clear, and it will attract the people that will fit and want to walk this path. And as a practice center, we have continued to evolve our visions through the years, right? At the core of it, there is the monastic body that we are training, where it's a school, it's a practice, it's a cultivation. And then at a spiritual level, it's a refuge for those wanting to transform suffering, walk the path of meditation, of understanding and transformation. And because this is our offering, then it brings in these people, these folks that have that heart, that want to walk towards the path of mindfulness. So I think communities have to have an identity, and we don't have to be stuck to that identity, but we can evolve. It can keep growing. The Sangha tree is an ever-growing tree. The Sangha river is continuing to open new paths so that the river can keep going to the ocean. So identity, it's, now that I've spoken to a lot of folks in community building and even looking at our Sangha, knowing identity is important, or else we feel lost. What are we doing? So that those are some crucial elements, and there is so many layers that we can get into, and we can totally go get nerdy about it. Like we have the 6 harmonies, we have the precepts, the 250 precepts that I spoke about, we have the policies, we have rules and regulations, what are our limits, what are our capacity, when to say no, when we have to close the monastery, so all of these are from direct experience to keeping a healthy community. And the things that I experienced 20 years ago have already changed, because our community have also organically grown and has outdone itself even, like back in the days. I was sharing to some of the aspirants, I used to give orientation for 2 people. We used to have just 2 people arrive to Plum Village. And now on a weekly basis, if we're open, at least 40 people to 60 to 80. A day of mindfulness, Joe, you see, it's 500 people. It used to be 200. So it's just like the spike have really gone up. So, and we have to adapt, and we have to create new boundaries as we grow.
Thank you. And brother, just finally, I love the way that what you're showing so beautifully is how everything is wrapped up in everything else. So the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, you can't separate them. And also, I really like this idea because it speaks very much to me about faith. Our faith drives our practice, and our practice and the insights we get from our practice drive our faith. And so that none of these things are linear processes, that the Buddha has devised the Dharma, and the Dharma supports the community, and that's it. It's like they're all revolving around and interplaying and intersecting with each other constantly.
Absolutely. And the Sangha, coming back to the Sangha, because it was our teacher's favorite subject, and I understand so deeply why he emphasized so much on the Sangha, because the Sangha is the safest place especially for monastic. It's like the forest that keeps us safe from falling off track. It's the home, it's the refuge. And Tai used to tell us that whenever you suffer and your mind tells you to run away from the Sangha, that's when you have to stay. And I've gone through that, and it has been so enlightening to be so humbled by the fact that you can take refuge in others, because our own self pride plays a very big role in removing ourselves from the path. And when we take refuge in the Sangha, it is also telling our pride to take refuge in others to help us on this path. And in the gatha that I received from Thai, the second line, it goes, Suốt đời nương tựa có tăng thân. My whole life, I will have to take refuge in the Sangha. And when he transmitted me that gatha, he repeated that line like 3 times, Joe.
Just in case you
Just
didn't
in case
hear it.
I didn't hear it. And I remember one time, after he said that your whole life you have to take refuge in the Sangha, he looked at me, he's like, do you understand? I'm like, yes, Thai.
A direct order.
Direct order.
Brother, thank you so much. So, dear listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, there are many more with lots more of Phap Huu's wisdom available. And you can find The Way Out is in series on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on other platforms that carry podcasts, and also on our very own Plum Village app.
And this podcast was brought to you by the Plum Village app, as well as our good friend Global Optimism, and from the generous donation that we have received from all of you through the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation. And if you would like to continue to support us and support our mission, support our work we do, please visit www.tnhf.org. And at Donate, you can also select the Plum Village donation, where you are supporting the monastics as well as where this podcast is being recorded and supported. So we are very grateful for all the generous donation. And we would like to give special thanks to our 2 co-producer, to our producer Clay, aka the Podfather, our producer Kata, who is today also our sound engineer, as well as Anka, our show notes, and Jasmine, our social media guardian angel, and to our other Joe, who is our editor of the podcast. And to all of you for accompanying us and joining us on this journey and being a support to the podcast. Thank you.
All the best.
The way out is in.